Gunfire doesn't echo the way people expect. It doesn't sound like something from a movie. It's sharper, more violent. It cuts through the air like something tearing apart the structure of the moment itself. The first shot hits, and for a fraction of a second, nothing happens. People don't react immediately. Their minds hesitate, trying to process what they just heard. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Glasses hover in the air. Eyes shift, searching for confirmation that this isn't real. Then the second shot lands. Closer. Louder. Now the illusion collapses. A wave of confusion spreads through the corridor. Guests step back instinctively, some turning, others freezing completely. A woman stumbles into a table. A chair scrapes violently across the floor. Someone drops something. It shatters, but no one notices. Because now there's movement. Fast movement. Secret Service agents react before the crowd understands what's happening. Their bodies shift instantly, trained responses overriding hesitation. One agent moves to block the hallway. Another grabs a civilian, pulling them out of the line of exposure. A third pivots, hand already moving toward his weapon. There's no discussion, no confirmation, only action. And then, they see him. The attacker isn't retreating. He's advancing. That's the moment everything changes. Because panic moves backward, but he's moving forward. Through it. Against it. With purpose. His pace isn't frantic, it's controlled, focused. He pushes through bodies that are trying to get away, forcing space where there shouldn't be any. His shoulders stay steady. His direction never breaks. He knows exactly where he's going. And more importantly, he knows how close he is. The corridor suddenly feels smaller, tighter. The distance between him and the secured checkpoint ahead is shrinking faster than anyone expected. Too fast. An agent shouts sharp, commanding, but the words dissolve into the chaos. Another agent steps forward, trying to intercept, but the crowd becomes an obstacle. Civilians trapped in between create hesitation, even for trained responders. And that hesitation is dangerous. Because proximity changes everything. He's no longer outside the system. He's inside it. Every step forward increases the risk exponentially. Every second that passes reduces the margin for error. Now the agents are no longer just reacting. They're racing. Racing against distance. Racing against time. Racing against the possibility that they might be just 1 second too late. The attacker pushes again, breaking through a gap in the crowd. His movement sharpens. The hesitation around him becomes his advantage. Fear creates space, and he uses it. The final checkpoint is just ahead. A narrow barrier between chaos and containment. Beyond it, a room full of power. A room that cannot absorb what's coming. And now, for the first time, the full weight of the situation becomes clear. If he crosses that line, even for a moment, control disappears. The agents see it. They feel it. And in that instant, everything compresses into a single realization. This is not just an incident. This is a breaking point. Below the chaos, the world feels untouched. The ballroom breathes in calm, measured rhythm. Soft light settles across polished surfaces, reflecting off glass and metal in quiet patterns. Conversations move in low tones, controlled, deliberate, almost rehearsed. It's the kind of environment built on certainty, on the assumption that everything beyond these walls is under control. Nothing here feels fragile. At the center of the room sits something far more significant than a gathering. It's concentration. Power, compressed into a single space. Rows of tables stretch across the floor, filled with officials, advisors, security personnel, and invited guests. Faces that shape decisions, voices that influence outcomes far beyond this room. Some speak quietly, leaning toward one another. Others sit back, observing. A few scan the room out of habit, trained to notice what others ignore. But even trained eyes can't see through walls. And above them, everything is already changing. The structure of the ballroom creates a sense of security, thick walls, controlled access points, limited entrances monitored by personnel and reinforced by metal detectors. Every pathway into this room is designed to filter risk before it arrives. On paper, it works perfectly. But systems don't fail all at once. They fail in layers. And right now, those layers are being tested in ways no one inside can see. A server moves between tables, placing glasses with careful precision. A quiet laugh rises from one side of the room, quickly fading back into the controlled hum of conversation. Someone checks their watch. Another adjusts their seat. Normal movement. Normal behavior. Nothing signals danger, but the environment itself carries a hidden weakness. The room is deep within the structure, surrounded, enclosed, designed for privacy, not evacuation. The exits are few, narrow compared to the number of people inside. Pathways that work under calm conditions, but under pressure, they become bottlenecks. And that changes everything. If something breaches the perimeter above, this room transforms instantly. From organized to chaotic. From controlled to trapped. Because large crowds don't move quickly in confined spaces. They compress, they hesitate, they collide. And in those first critical seconds, direction disappears. Panic replaces structure. And that's where the real danger begins. At one of the central tables, a senior official leans forward, speaking quietly. Their tone is calm, measured, focused on something routine, something predictable. They have no idea how fragile that moment is. No idea that just one level above them, distance is collapsing. No idea that timing precise, unforgiving timing is now the only thing separating this room from a completely different outcome. Because security here depends on sequence. Threat detected. Threat stopped. Barrier holds. But what happens when the sequence breaks? What happens when detection is late? When distance is already gone? When the threat isn't approaching, but arriving? The illusion of safety holds for now. It holds because no one inside knows it's already under pressure. Because just beyond the walls, in narrow corridors filled with confusion and movement, a single individual is pushing forward, closing the gap between intention and impact. And if that gap disappears, this room will feel it instantly. Not as a warning, but as a shock. A violent shift from calm to chaos. And by then, there will be no time to prepare, only time to react. And in spaces like this, reaction is never fast enough. He never looked dangerous. That's what allowed everything else to happen. To the systems designed to detect threats, he was invisible. His record was clean. No history of violence, no incidents that would trigger attention, nothing that would justify a second look. On paper, he was exactly what the system expects, a normal civilian moving through ordinary routines. And that's where the gap begins. Because systems don't measure intent, they measure history. He moved through public spaces without hesitation. Airports, streets, hotels, places filled with people who never noticed him and had no reason to. He spoke when necessary, remained quiet when not, blended into the background of movement and noise. But beneath that surface, something had already changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, gradually. A shift in thinking, a narrowing focus. Decisions forming in isolation, away from interruption, away from scrutiny. There were no visible warning signs, nothing that would stand out to friends, strangers, or authorities. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because by the time intent becomes visible, it's no longer forming. It's already in motion. To everyone around him, he remained just another face in a crowd. Unremarkable, unnoticed. But to himself, the path was already clear. And once he stepped onto it, there was no hesitation left, only execution. By the time anyone realized what he intended to do, he was already inside the perimeter. There was no dramatic infiltration, no disguises, no fake identities, no shadowy networks moving behind the scenes. Instead, everything happened in the open. He used the same systems millions of people rely on every day: public transportation, busy terminals, hotels filled with constant movement, places where attention is divided and no one has time to question ordinary behavior. And that was the strategy: to appear ordinary. At every stage, he blended in seamlessly, standing in lines, walking through crowded corridors, passing through checkpoints designed for efficiency, not suspicion. No alarms were triggered. No one stopped him. No one looked twice. Because nothing about him seemed wrong. His belongings moved with him, bags that looked like every other bag. Items arranged in a way that revealed nothing, disassembled, separated, hidden within normal objects. To anyone observing, there was no reason to inspect further. The system processed him like it processes everyone else. Quickly, smoothly, without resistance. And that's what made it effective. This wasn't about forcing entry. It was about moving through spaces where barriers didn't exist yet. Step by step, he reduced the distance between himself and the target. Each decision brought him closer, not just physically, but strategically. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to, because the system was working in his favor. Every moment he remained unnoticed increased his advantage. And by the time that advantage became visible, it was already too late to stop it early. The plan didn't rely on complexity. It relied on something far more dangerous: the assumption that nothing was wrong. And under that assumption, he kept moving forward, closer to the point where everything would change. The most dangerous moment in any security failure is not the breach itself. It is the realization that the breach has already happened. And in this case, it had. He was already inside the perimeter. Not approaching it, not testing it, not forcing it. Inside it. That single fact changes everything that follows. Because security systems are built on one core assumption: threats come from outside. They are detected early, intercepted at distance, and neutralized before reaching critical zones. Layers are stacked outward like rings around a protected center. But when the threat is already inside those rings, the entire model collapses. He moved through the building like any other guest. Hallways filled with quiet movement, staff passing without interruption, elevators opening and closing in steady rhythm, doors that should represent control instead offering passage without resistance. No alarms, no alerts, no hesitation. Because nothing about him triggered the system designed to notice abnormal behavior. He belonged there, at least in appearance. And that appearance was enough. Security personnel were positioned strategically, but their focus was outward, monitoring entrances, observing arrivals, managing crowd flow. Their attention was directed toward preventing external penetration, not internal mobility. That distinction created a blind spot, and he moved directly through it. Each corridor became a path forward. Each intersection offered options. Stairwells connected levels that were never meant to be fully isolated. Service routes overlapped with public access areas. What was designed for efficiency in a functioning hotel now became something else entirely. A map of movement. A structure with too many connections and too few barriers. And he understood it. He didn't rush. There was no need. Speed creates attention. Attention creates risk. Instead, he moved with control, measured, deliberate, invisible, in motion. Every step brought him closer to the center of activity, closer to the secured zones, closer to the point where systems would finally begin to notice him, but only after he had already advanced too far. Inside the building, everything still appeared normal. Conversations continued, staff moved between tasks, guests remained unaware of anything unusual. The surface reality remained intact, stable, predictable, unchanged. But beneath that surface, the structure was shifting. Because proximity is not just physical, it is operational. And with every corridor he passed, every threshold he crossed without resistance, the margin of safety narrowed. There was no confrontation, no resistance, no interruption, only movement. And that is what makes this phase so critical. Because when a threat is detected outside a perimeter, there is time to respond. But when it is already inside, response becomes reaction. And reaction is always slower than intention. He was now approaching the final internal pathways leading toward restricted zones. Areas where security presence increased, where monitoring became tighter, where movement should have been questioned. But by the time any question would form, he would already be at the edge of impact. And from here onward, every second would matter more than the last. Because inside the perimeter, there are no longer multiple layers of defense. There is only one. And if that layer fails, there is nothing left behind it. Time doesn't slow down in moments like this. It compresses. Every second becomes heavier, sharper, more expensive. He leaves the room without urgency. No sudden movements, no visible tension, just controlled motion through familiar corridors. To anyone watching, he is still just another person moving through a building that operates on routine. Cameras track him, but they don't react to him. There is nothing in his posture that suggests what is about to happen. And that is exactly what makes him invisible. Above him, the structure is becoming more active. Security presence increases near the lower levels. Movement becomes denser. Conversations shorten. Instructions begin to pass between personnel in quicker, more focused exchanges. Something is shifting, but not everyone understands why. He continues forward. Step by step, the environment changes. Hallways become more restricted. Lighting shifts slightly. Access points appear more controlled. Doors that once opened freely now require clearance, presence, recognition. He keeps moving anyway. Because at this stage, stopping is no longer part of the plan. Then comes the pressure point. The final checkpoint. The place where movement is supposed to be filtered, contained, verified. This is where systems are supposed to catch what has been missed. But systems depend on timing, and timing is already failing. For a brief moment, everything seems stable. Ordinary movement, normal flow. Then, something breaks in the pattern. His pace changes. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough to shift from background presence to focal point. Heads turn. Attention sharpens. Security reacts a fraction too late to prevent escalation, but fast enough to understand what is happening. And in that narrow window, everything collapses into action. The environment that was calm seconds ago erupts into motion. Commands are shouted, barriers shift, hands move instinctively toward weapons. He is no longer invisible. He is no longer unnoticed. He is the center of attention. And now, there is no turning back. Because the final approach is not about distance anymore. It is about seconds. And those seconds are already running out. Everything happens at once, but feels like it happens too late. The first movement comes from security. Fast, trained, precise. Agents surge forward, closing distance before the attacker can gain another step. Their training takes over completely. No hesitation, no delay, only reaction shaped by repetition and pressure. The corridor turns into controlled chaos. Commands are shouted, but they overlap, breaking into fragments. Civilians scatter instinctively, pressing against walls, dropping to the ground, trying to create distance from something they cannot fully understand. Shots echo again. Not many, but enough to fracture the moment. The attacker is still moving forward, but the space around him is collapsing now. Every angle is being closed. Every path forward is narrowing. He is only feet away from the final barrier. Just seconds. Seconds from crossing into a space that holds far more than just people. It holds structure, leadership, and national consequence. This is the tipping point. Everything depends on what happens in the next movement. If he advances, the outcome changes instantly. But he doesn't get the chance. A surge of coordinated response hits at the exact moment pressure peaks. Agents converge, overwhelming his forward motion, forcing him down before he can reach the threshold. The weapon is controlled. The movement stops. Silence doesn't return, but the threat changes form. Now it is contained, but not yet understood. Because stopping him was only the first part. Understanding how close it came is where the real danger begins. The moment the immediate threat is contained, everything shifts from action to analysis. There is no celebration, no relief, only questions. Investigators arrive quickly, moving through the same corridors that minutes ago were filled with panic and motion. Every detail matters now. Every second must be reconstructed. Every decision must be examined in reverse. Cameras are pulled, logs are reviewed, witness statements begin to form a fragmented timeline, broken pieces of a sequence that only makes sense when placed together. And what emerges is not a single failure. It is something more uncomfortable. A chain. Small gaps that appeared harmless in isolation. A delay here, a missed signal there, a moment where attention shifted elsewhere. None of it enough on its own to cause disaster, but together they form a path. A path that was never supposed to exist. The realization settles slowly. This wasn't a situation where security collapsed under pressure. It was a situation where security was quietly bypassed step by step without triggering a full response until the final moments. And that leads to the most important question of all. Not what happened in the end, but how far it was allowed to go before anyone noticed. When investigators break the system down, nothing looks completely broken. That is the most unsettling part. Security protocols were active, checkpoints were staffed, procedures were followed. On paper, everything appears functional. But when the timeline is rebuilt, a different picture starts to emerge, one built not on failure, but on absence. Absence of early screening. Absence of verification at entry points inside the building. Absence of immediate escalation when subtle risks appeared. Each gap by itself is small, almost invisible. The kind of detail that doesn't trigger alarms or emergency response, but in sequence, they create something dangerous. Space. Space for movement, space for access, space for progression without interruption. The attacker didn't break through reinforced defenses. He didn't overpower systems designed to stop him. He moved through areas where no system was actively watching. That distinction changes everything, because it reveals a truth that is difficult to accept. The threat didn't need to be extraordinary. It only needed opportunity. And opportunity was not created by a single failure. It was created by multiple small assumptions that nothing unusual would happen, that existing layers were enough, that the threat would be detected earlier in the chain. But it wasn't. And by the time those assumptions were proven wrong, the movement had already reached too far to stop early. When analysts step back and look beyond this single event, the pattern becomes difficult to ignore. This was not an isolated failure. It is part of a sequence that stretches across multiple incidents, different locations, and unrelated attackers, but with a shared structure underneath. Each case begins the same way: normal environments, open access points, and systems built to assume stability rather than anticipate disruption. In every case, the early stages look harmless. Nothing appears urgent enough to trigger full escalation. Movements are slow, unremarkable, easy to dismiss in real time. And in every case, the response comes late, not because people are untrained, but because the signals themselves are too subtle at first. The result is a repeating pattern. A threat moves through gaps that were never designed to be tested in real conditions. By the time those gaps are recognized, the threat has already advanced deeper than expected. What makes this especially concerning is not the success of any single attacker, but the consistency of near misses. Each one ends just before total escalation. Each one exposes another weakness, and each one shortens the distance between prevention and disaster. The uncomfortable realization is simple. The system is not failing suddenly. It is being slowly tested and gradually exposed by threats that adapt faster than the defenses built to stop them. The investigation now turns into a deeper question of consequence. Inside the confined space, experts reconstruct what could have happened if the final barrier had failed. A crowded room, limited exits, high-value leadership concentrated in one place. In that scenario, movement would collapse instantly into chaos, panic would spread faster than control, and communication lines would break under pressure. But it never reaches that point. Because at the critical moment, the response holds. Agents move without hesitation, closing the final distance and preventing entry into the most sensitive area. It is not a single action, it is coordination under extreme pressure, built on training, timing, and discipline. The attacker is contained, the immediate danger ends. But the outcome is not just about what was stopped, it is about what was narrowly avoided. In the aftermath, the system is reevaluated again and again, not to assign blame, but to understand timing, awareness, and structural weakness. Every layer is reviewed, every assumption tested, and one truth remains consistent. Security is never absolute. It is only as strong as its ability to adapt before the next threat arrives. In the end, what holds the line is not perfection, but seconds.